Meet Lucas, a 22-year-old from Spain, who stumbled upon a dusty old book about George Washington in his abuelo's attic. At first, Lucas was just curious. He'd heard the name before, but he didn't know the man behind the legend. One rainy evening in Madrid, he cracked open that book, determined to uncover what made Washington not just a historical figure, but a timeless symbol of courage, integrity, and leadership. What he found would change the way he viewed challenges in his own life, and it might just change yours too. Lucas read how George was born on February 22nd, 1732, in colonial Virginia, then part of the British Empire. From the moment he came into the world, his life was woven with both privilege and responsibility. His father died when George was just 11, and that loss thrust him into the role of caretaker for his younger siblings. At an age when most boys are worrying about chores and chores alone, young George was already making hard decisions for his family's future. By the time he was only 16, George Washington had lost his older half-brother Lawrence, which opened the door for George to inherit the family's Mount Vernon estate. Imagine that, a teenager suddenly responsible for one of the largest plantations in Virginia. Many would have crumbled under such weight, but George embraced it. He taught himself surveying, learned to manage workers and land, and even wrote legal documents. He made mistakes, of course, miscalculations in surveying, disagreements with neighbors, but he learned from each one. He didn't hide from failure. He treated it as a stepping stone. Lucas paused and thought about the times he'd let failure keep him from trying again. He realized that George's early life was a masterclass in turning setbacks into opportunities. Lucas pictured himself at that very desk, dusty book in hand, determined to find parallels in his own story, late-night study sessions instead of surveying marshy rivers, small stumbles at university instead of plantation disputes. As he turned the pages, Lucas discovered George's role in the French and Indian War. Appointed as a lieutenant colonel in the Virginia militia at just 22, Washington led his troops through treacherous woods of the Ohio Valley. Faced with harsh weather, supply shortages, and a formidable enemy, he learned the importance of resilience and adaptability. When a surprise French attack nearly wiped out his men, Washington took responsibility, crafting a clear-eyed report that, rather than blaming others, acknowledged his own mistakes. Instead of hiding his errors, he analyzed them, adapted his tactics, and earned the trust of his superiors. Lucas felt a spark of inspiration. Here was a leader who showed that owning up to mistakes builds credibility. In Spain, Lucas had faced his own battlefield, exams he failed, presentations where his voice trembled. But what if he followed George's example? Could he transform his own stumbles into stories of growth? Then came the pivotal chapters of the American Revolution. Washington, now in his early 40s, had never led an entire nation. Yet when the Second Continental Congress appointed him commander-in-chief of the Continental Army in 1775, he accepted with humility and conviction. He didn't believe he was the best soldier, but he believed in the cause, freedom from tyranny. Lucas read how Washington crossed the Delaware River on a cold December night in 1776, leading a daring surprise attack that turned the tide at Trenton. Picture the ice-choked river, the biting wind, each man's breath visible in the lantern light, and Washington standing tall in his blue coat, voice steady as he rallied his weary troops. Victory or death? Lucas imagined that scene vividly. He thought about the times he'd felt frozen by fear, before a job interview, a classroom debate, even asking someone out on a date. What if, like Washington, he instead took a bold step across his own stormy waters? What if he leaned into fear, using it as fuel rather than succumbing to paralysis? Throughout the war, Washington endured humiliating defeats at Brandywine and Germantown. His soldiers went months without pay, suffering through winters at Valley Forge with little shelter or food. Yet he stayed. He refused to quit when everything seemed lost. He wrote letters begging Congress for supplies, comforted his men when they grieved fallen friends, and led by example, sharing their hardships. Lucas read a letter where Washington wrote, "Perseverance and spirit have done wonders in all ages." Suddenly, perseverance was no longer an abstract word. It was the lifeblood that carried a fledgling nation through its darkest hours. Lucas closed his eyes and pictured himself at Valley Forge, shivering in the snow, yet pressing on because his leader believed in him. He thought about the long nights he'd spent doubting his own goals. What if he, too, could summon that same spirit of perseverance? When the war finally ended in 1783, Washington faced another test: victory. Many powerful figures wanted him to seize control, declare himself king, or become a military dictator. Instead, on December 23rd of that year, he resigned his commission and returned to Mount Vernon. Lucas read about this moment as if it were a scene in a movie, Washington in his uniform, candlelight flickering against the walls of the Maryland State House, voice firm as he tells Congress, "I now return, the appointment which I accepted with reluctance, to the hands from which it was derived." In that act of humility and respect for the rule of law, Washington cemented a principle that would define American democracy. Lucas felt tears sting his eyes. Here was a man who had every reason to seize power, yet chose to give it up for the greater good. It was a lesson in servant leadership, putting others before yourself. Lucas thought about his own ambitions. Would he ever have the courage to step back, share credit, or do what was right rather than what was easy? Next, Lucas discovered Washington's presidency. At 61, he became the first president of the United States. He navigated uncharted territory, creating the cabinet, establishing the Supreme Court, setting financial precedents with Alexander Hamilton, and defining the peaceful transition of power. When Congress passed a law taxing whiskey, farmers in western Pennsylvania rebelled. Washington personally led a militia to quell the Whiskey Rebellion, again proving that he believed in both justice and restraint. He never abused his power. He showed that true leadership means upholding the law and listening to dissent. By the time Lucas finished the final chapter, he realized George Washington's life wasn't just history, it was a treasure trove of leadership lessons. Courage in the face of fear. Integrity when no one's watching. Perseverance when the odds are against you. Humility when power tempts you. Lucas closed the book, heart racing, mind buzzing with possibilities. He wasn't the only one. Across the world, in countless foreign countries, from Brazil to Japan, from India to Nigeria, you'll find young people like Lucas, ages ranging from 18 to 25, discovering that Washington's story still speaks to them. And now I want you to ask yourself, what's your Delaware River? What freezing, turbulent water stands between you and your goal? Maybe it's starting that business, asking for a promotion, learning a new language, or simply standing up for your beliefs. Whatever it is, remember George Washington. Picture him crossing that river. Hear the crunch of ice under your boots. Feel the cold bite at your face. And know that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in spite of it. If George Washington, born in a colonial backwater, orphaned early, stumbling through failures, leading an army of volunteers, resisting the lure of absolute power, could stand tall, so can you. Your story starts now. Take that first step across your river. Embrace your challenges as George did his. Lead with integrity. Persevere with spirit. Thank you for listening to Lucas's journey of discovery. If this story moved you, if it stirred something deep inside, please hit that like button, subscribe for more motivational history stories, and share this with a friend who needs a reminder that they, too, can lead. Leave a comment below. What's the river you'll cross? Let's inspire each other. Until next time, keep moving forward, just like Washington did. Ask ChatGPT.